Hi, today I'm going to discuss how to start changing undesired behaviors because autistic or neurotypical, there will be times when our children engage in behaviors that are dangerous or could hurt themselves or someone else. This could be running into the street or hitting another person. Or perhaps the behavior is not necessarily dangerous but inconvenient. For instance, they don't want to get dressed in the mornings, or perhaps they're even having meltdowns in the mornings. And like everyone in the morning, we only have so much time to get everyone and everything ready and out the door. When this happens, it can be tempting to do something called labeling our children. Labeling is when we describe our children in terms of personality traits. It looks like saying things such as, Johnny is being mean, Sally is being a bully, Graham is such a brat. Labeling our children is not only counterproductive, it is hurtful, and it can even perpetuate the behavior we don't want to see, especially if we are doing it in earshot. How does this happen? Well, for one thing, it doesn't tell our children which behavior is inappropriate and needs to change. Being mean can encompass a lot of different things, and your child may be confused about which behavior isn't appropriate. It also doesn't tell your child which behavior is appropriate or what to do instead. Second, and this is where the behavior can perpetuate itself, they can start to internalize the label, which is the opposite of what we want. When our children hear people describe them as being mean, they start to figure, well, I guess they're right. I'm just going to act mean. This is just how I am. Worse, people will start to expect to see your child act mean and look for times that they are being mean and ignore the times when they are being nice. A more effective thing to do is to describe the behavior, because a behavior can change. This looks something like saying, it is not okay when you hit your sister, or it's not okay to call names, or I don't like how you screamed at me when I told you no ice cream. Can you think of a better way to handle this? There are many reasons to describe a behavior. For one, a behavior is something that we can measure and we can define. If we know we are targeting a behavior such as hitting, for example, we can count how many times it is happening. We can track the behavior to see if there are any patterns, which would give us insight into the reason the behavior is happening. We can then formulate a plan to decrease a behavior we don't want to see or increase a behavior that we do want to see, and keep track of whether or not the intervention we developed is working. Those are things that we can't do with a label. Here's an example of how this worked in real life. For a time, my son, who is autistic, was in a preschool program for kids with special needs. His teacher kept sending me notes home that my son was being defiant. I was confused by this because I'd not noticed such behaviors with him, and by telling him he was being defiant, she wasn't giving me good information. When I asked her what was going on, I learned that he would sit on the floor during times of transition. Well, sitting on the floor is a behavior that I can work with, and given that my son was autistic, I can also deduce that it was his way of trying to let the teacher know he was overwhelmed with the transition. With the insight that he was feeling overwhelmed during transitions, which is, once again, common for autistic children, I was able to let his therapist know that he was having trouble here, and they started working with him to learn skills to cope with transitions. Now he copes a lot better with the school environment because he learned skills that helped him. Being labeled defiant didn't help anything. It didn't help my son's teacher see the behavior she wanted, and it definitely didn't help my son to be given such a negative label for trying to communicate that he was overwhelmed. By learning about the behavior when it happens and figuring out the reason that it was happening, we are able to help him learn to cope with transitions. So in summary, to work on changing behaviors, first we have to avoid the temptation to saddle our children with an unhelpful and counterproductive label. And then we have to define the behavior that we want to see change. I hope you enjoyed this and found it enlightening. I will put out new videos every Tuesday. Be sure to follow and subscribe, or go to my webpage in the description for more information. Next week, I'll be talking about the importance of giving our children the benefit of the doubt, so be sure to tune in. Have a safe day.